Now recording. Yeah, okay. So moving the test is something that I would only do if I had the unanimous support of the class. So we'll skip that. With my apologies. So, should turn the projector on. It's really quiet in this room.
You're just used to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's true. What we need to do is fire Unity up, get these things cooking. In seriousness, though, please fire Unity up. Create a new project, and there we go. No description. Strange. This seems like it's incomplete. I was going to talk about the lab. Well. Let's see if we can't fix that. So, I'll get that uploaded as soon as I get back to the office. So, let's discuss applications of class relationships inside of the context of a Unity project. So, we've talked about things like inheritance and composition inside of the context of a C# console application, where we did a few simple examples. So let's discuss something a little more real, something strongly object-oriented. So composition is something that we have been working with in Unity this entire time. If we consider the manner in which game objects are subdivided into game components, this is already a composition relationship, right? We have, in this case, an object named main camera. That object contains audio listener, which is an instantiation of the audio listener class. We have a camera, which is an instantiation of the camera class. So this object has instances of sub-objects. It's already in a composition relationship. Make sense? Good, 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 good. All right. So, if we want to talk about inheritance, we might want to. We need to talk about things a little bit differently. So, let me just pull up an image for you. What's the newest Super Mario? Is it still Odyssey? Probably. So let's see. Gameplay image. Let me see like an actual screenshot, please. There are a lot of screenshots, but let me see here. So let's consider something like this image right here. Oh man, are you gonna image? There we go. Yes, there we go. So let's consider this, which is a scene from a quasi-recent video game. So this is an object-oriented system composed of game objects. But these game objects are categorized into various groups, right? In the same way that our fruit, we have the concept of fruit, and then we have each of the individual fruits, the same sort of analysis can be used here, although within the context of this software system, it's a bit, the categorization is a bit more based on functionality rather than what a thing is. So, are you folks familiar with like the shtick for this game, like the central mechanic? So in this game, our overall plumber friend takes his cap, which has been infected with a ghost, and then, yeah, this is digital health, so we should phrase everything in terms of infection, right? There's a ghost in his hat that will possess anything his hat lands on, as long as it's a specifically possessable object in the sort of game world, right? So, for example, you have taxi cabs, which basically the rule in the game is like if it's not wearing a hat, you can put your hat on it, sort of. So we have taxi cabs within the game that you can put your hat on. Those are hattable objects, which transfer player control to the object that the hat is on, right? I believe there are some of these strange, realistic-looking NPCs that are also not wearing hats that you can take control of in this level. This level is kind of an interesting one because just from like the perspective of what on earth is going on in the Mario universe, because like you have correctly proportioned human beings. So then what on earth is Mario? Because he's ostensibly human, right? But he exists in the same universe, on the same planet no less, as these things which are also supposed to be humans. So, and anyway, so you can imagine that there are a number of different, there's like one class which is possessible, right? With a number of sub-objects, you know, that are the different types of things that can be possessed. Because in game, you know, you will have more than, like, there are a couple of things in the game where you can, like, they only exist in one spot, but often a possessible thing will occur multiple times throughout the game, of course, because they're trying to, you know, there's an economy going on, it's more work to program each separate thing you're supposed to be controlling. Anyway, another thing that you can do with the hat is like, if it interacts with certain environmental objects in the field, then you get a coin, right? The hat has many interactions with many different things in different ways, and you can imagine all of that functionality being common to a set of different objects. So, for example, when you pop the hat on top of a fire hydrant and spin it, the fire hydrant turns on, right? And stuff like that. Is this making sense? So, within the context of a much simpler game, one of the things that you might imagine being the case, I think I want a 2D game, not a 3D game. Can we just like pop it in 2D mode? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Although, I think that's, that'll be fine. So, one of the things that, to sort of scale things back somewhat, let's consider a game in the early shmup genre, such as Space Invaders or Galaga or Galaxian, right? For the purposes of illustration, I will now call up a video of one of these games.
The music is off.
Hmm?
So it's a new game on Google Cat Food.
Oh. Yeah. So with this game, you can see that like basically you have instantiations of this ghost class, right? And each one will have a different symbol that you're supposed to, draw. But then you've got this guy. He functions in much the same way, right? Like the boss character. The boss character has more symbols that you have to do, but ultimately a lot of the code would be shared between him and the tiny ghosts, right? So both would be derived from one base enemy class, right? In the same way, if you consider a game such as Galaga, although this person is shockingly bad at it, there you go. You've got, although they got to stage 25, so.
Galaga's hard.
Galaga is
Or
a
maybe
lot,
I'm just bad at it.
it's a lot harder if you don't know the double shift trick.
Oh, shit.
Do you know the double shift trick?
Yeah, where the spaceship, and then you shoot the spaceship down. But to get to the point where the spaceship starts to abduct you is just inherently hard.
Well, I mean, let's, just missed an opportunity. Look how many extra lives he has, But, these old arcade games, Quarter munchers. But, so, going to a screen where we have, several different aliens on screen at once. So, in this game, the enemies have different attack patterns based on whether they're the red guys or the yellow guys, right? And then you have the boss Galaga at the back, which they take 2 hits, right? But fundamentally, these things all have a set of common attributes. They all can fire the little projectiles, right? They all have some kind of swooping attack pattern which can be initiated, even if the particular details of that pattern are specific to the individual alien. And they all take damage and die if they get hit by the player's bullets, but not if they get hit by their own bullets, right? So these are all features which are common to or they could be encoded as features common to a base class, which are picked up by other objects, right? So, in terms of practicalities, what we are going to be doing here in Unity is we are going to make a C# object which is not a script. Up to now, everything that we've done with C# in Unity has been to attach a script to a game object. And don't get me wrong, you can make an entire game that way. In fact, you can make 2 entire games that way, put them up on Steam, and then end up teaching a class like this. But you can also create C# classes that are not attached to any specific game object that allows them to be instantiated by scripts as objects. The same way that we created point in the line class and then we instantiated that inside of the main thread. Make sense? So, they still call them scripts though. So create C# script, call this, let's call it enemy script. Now, making a script in this way, Unity will still assume that it'll still assume that this is intended for attaching to a game object. It will still inherit mono behavior. Skip. Incidentally, I was at a software curriculum meeting earlier today, where at the meeting I raised that probably everywhere we're using Unity in the program, we should probably be using this instead. Have you guys heard of Godot? No? Open source alternative to Unity and other sorts of things. You can do anything that with this you can do anywhere else, basically. It's nice and well supported, and even better, it's free, and it doesn't require money from you for licensing, like Unity does, if you release anything past a certain threshold. And further, the download size is like 50 megs, whereas with Unity it's like what is it, 4 gigs, and even like the Unity projects themselves are like outrageously large for what they do. One wonders where all the data is going. But anyway, it also does C# if you want. But yep, it's got a built-in code editor. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a game engine where you can edit a script in the same application that the game is in?
Doesn't use Visual Studio?
Doesn't. It has a tag.
Whoa.
Not to mention, being the free and open source loyalist that I am, note my preferred family of operating systems. I'm a member of the cult of Penguin. Oh, that's Tux, the Linux Penguin. Yeah. Basically, like, open source will win in the end because you can't beat free, So almost all of this is useless because we're not intending this to be a script attached to a game object, but just a class definition hanging out inside of our project. Public class enemy. Now, it is of paramount importance that the name of the class be the same as the name of the file. So please make sure, however you modify things, the name of the class and the name of the file are the same, because Unity will get really narky if that's not the case. And with good reason. So, let's imagine that we were making a class to describe the enemies in Galaga, right? What things would an enemy need?
The ability to be hit.
The ability to be hit, yes. I'll come back to you. So we would need a method. Oh, get out of my face. Okay. So we need something like public void take damage, right? It's okay to leave this blank for the time being. Ooh, I wonder if this does the Java thing. Can I just do the Java thing? No, I can't just do the Java thing. Okay. So public void take damage. In order to take damage, we should have some concept of,
Boxes and collision.
well, not hitboxes and collision so far.
Or
HP, yeah. Like, if we're gonna take hits, we need hit points. So, public int HP. There we go. What were you going to say?
Well, the enemies in Galaga can like move around, so maybe methods to move their position.
So, I agree. That particular one is a little bit complicated. Like, obviously not impossible, but basically, like, what you would need to do, like, the simple version of that would be that you would include, like, an array of, like, coordinates to move to, and like an amount of time it should take to, or perhaps you move at a fixed rate from set point to set point to set point. But you know, you'd move like 1, 10, 2, 12, 1, 14, you know, 2, 16, right? And that would result in a sort of a zigzag pattern like this, assuming that y is increasing as you go down, which is the case in some systems, right? Which, too complicated for us for the time being, but that's how you might go about doing something like that. If you wanted to do something like in Galaga proper, you would need some way to specify an arc, right? Which, again, certainly not impossible. But, you know, you're starting to talk into, like, reproducing things like the SVG line kind of thing. You're starting to, like, if you don't want a perfect arc, a perfectly circular arc, perhaps you want to do something like that. You're starting to talk about splines. You know what a spline is?
Yeah, usually it does that.
Yeah. So, so, like, pathing is a much more complicated topic than it sounds like, so we'll leave it alone, but I'm glad that you now know that it's a more complicated topic than it sounds like. Although you can see, like, if you had a spline, you just, like, you know, simulate motion along the spline, and you may even get a certain amount of help from this, help with this from, like, Unity itself. I'm pretty sure it has like an animation pathing thing that it can do, but so let's do it more like Space Invaders, where there's no swooping at all.
So they just teleport to.
No, they're just like that, yeah. Thank you, I'll be here. Yeah, so let's imagine the enemies are static. Are there any other things the enemy should do. Yes?
Deal damage?
Deal damage. Yes, how do they deal damage?
You would need HP, and they would either melee attack or shoot something at you.
Yes. So let's do shoot something at you, right? So you'd need something like public, void, perhaps not void, fire, bullet, which means you would also need a bullet class, right? The enemy also needs something fairly basic. The enemy will need a transform, right? But it's going to need a lot more than just a transform. It's also going to need some way to render itself, right? So what we need to do is we need to have a spot inside of this class to store a reference to the prefab referred to by the object. So you can imagine we might have prefabricated assets for 2 or 3 different enemy types, and we any instance of the enemy class should have an association with a prefab, regardless what that prefab is. Probably the same is true of bullets. So public game object prefab and public game object bullet. There we go. So, it's fairly trivial to write in the contents of the take damage method. You can simply say something like HP minus minus, right? This is kind of assuming a basic system where you can only do 1 damage at a time. Which is fine for something like Space Invaders or Galaga, but it would be a bit limiting if your game was Final Fantasy. So here's a question. What happens if HP drops to 0? What should happen to an enemy?
Destroy the object.
You should destroy the object. Sure, the enemy should die, right? So, not only should it, within the enemy class, if we have a game object linked to us, so this would be a reference to the prefab. We also need a reference to the instantiated object. Instance, there we go. What we want to do is we want to destroy not only this object, but we also want to destroy the instance of the prefab that this object has been linked to. So we have to destroy things in a particular order. Destroy, destroy instance. And why are you complaining? Uh-oh. Are you a mono behavior method? Alright. instance dot get component enemy script dot kill. It will complain that this doesn't exist because we haven't created it yet, but nevertheless, this is what you want. So only things inheriting mono behavior can perform the act of creation and destruction on game objects. Only they can instantiate and destroy. So, if you want to kill an enemy, the enemy itself, like the prefab, will have to have a script which allows itself to be killed, right? You have to ask nicely, excuse me, could you please kill yourself? And then the enemy's like, oh, yes, very good. So, and then, and only then, can we deallocate this enemy instance. Which, oh man, C#, date object. How do you do that again? Okay. So there's no way to do it directly, alright. That'll be fine then. So, we won't worry about Firebullet for the time being. I think we've got enough on our plate. So, now, we should have an enemy prefab that we can slot in to this. And we also need a game controller which creates instances of the enemy class. So,